Hello, my name is Dale Mast, and I'm glad to share part of my life story with you to help you through your life story. I've been a pastor for 39 years, but I want to go back to about 14, 15 years ago. My wife, my first wife, passed away of cancer, and it's a story that had many different supernatural encounters, but the first one was actually 2 years before she died. We found out that she had a cancerous growth that was in her body. The doctor told her she needed to go immediately and have it removed. Now, the part that kept her from doing it was there was a woman in our church who was in her 30s who had had a cancer operation that was 98% successful and actually died literally a year before my wife had this diagnosis. And I told her, I said, honey, let's go to the doctor. Let's take care of this, because cancer had been in her family. And she said, no, it's my life. I don't want to do it. I'm going to go through sort of a homeopathic journey, and we're going to believe God. As a prophet, in my spirit, I knew if she did not go to the doctor, I felt the Lord was showing me she was going to die. And actually, I cannot express the amount of inner pain of knowing something at this level prophetically. But sometimes you have to walk through places that you don't understand. And some of you right now, maybe you're in a place you don't understand, but God, He has things prepared for you you don't know. So as we went through the process, there was a fear level that was in her life. You understand that, a fear of going to a doctor. So faith in God was a little bit hindered by the fear of that report that happened to that younger girl. So finally, she was willing to go to the doctor when it became the size of about a football. But at that point, the ovarian cancer had gone through part of her body and it turned into breast cancer. But when they took it out, they said she was 100% healed, but just a little bit went through and to breast cancer. And a year later, our church went from rejoicing to mourning her death. The amount of grief that I went through at 55 years old, I never planned. Some of you out there, you're facing grief. You've been through a divorce. You've been through, maybe you've never been married and you want to be married. And here I was, 55 years old. I knew about 120 pastors. I traveled out of my church and ministered. And when I was in Japan, actually a pastor there said, you know, I know somebody in Delaware you ought to take out on a date. And I was like, I'm 55 years old. I don't know how to date. But I sort of caved into it and I said, oh God, you have to help me. You have to send me my wife. So I started asking for God's intervention. But I just want to say that when I stood in front of my wife's casket with my children there, and I'm a pastor, I didn't have answers. All I knew was I could see Him. When you don't understand what you're going through, as long as you can see Him, that's your door out. So now I'm going to tell you the supernatural encounters I had. Because I didn't back off, I had to get closer to His face. When you don't understand what's happening, get closer to Him. It's the key to your future. So in it, I was praying. I said, Lord, I'm too old to date. Bring my wife to me. My wife, now that I've been married to 14 years, Luann, was up in New York, and actually she had a dream, and the Lord told her to move to Delaware, and she said, Delaware? And the Lord told her, said, you don't want to be like Jonah and not go where I send you. And He said, look under your bed. She looked under her bed, and there was, with all the pictures that she had, was a little book she had read to her son called Jonah. And she looked at that and she said, I'm going to Delaware. I'm not going to be like Jonah. Now, actually, she was going to work with another ministry. She worked in that ministry 7 months, and then the Lord moved her from there. And she said, Lord, I feel like I've missed it. The church felt like I shouldn't have gone. And here I left my business behind. She had a cleaning business, cleaned houses after her divorce. Her husband, he made a 6-figure income, but bankrupted her when they divorced. Have you ever been that place? And now she was cleaning the houses of people she used to be at, be friends with to help her out to make money. But when she moved to Delaware, she gave all of her income up. And the Lord says, I want you to go to Dover Destiny. And she's coming down to our church. And I was preaching, and the amount of grief that was on me, actually, it's sort of interesting. I didn't realize I'd become comfortable with a level of grief that I didn't even know I was carrying. Do you know you can carry grief so long you think it's normal, but it's not? So as she came, never been to our church before except at a prophetic conference with some other people, and this is the interesting part, at that prophetic conference with Sharon Stone, I was there literally prophesying, and I said, some of you are like Jacob. You're wrestling, don't let go of God until He blesses you. Well, before she came to that meeting, some people knocked on her door, and she had been praying, and God was speaking to her to be like Jacob. And in it, as she walked into the church, not ever having been there before, I'm prophesying, be like Jacob, hang on to God. And the people that brought her said, I can't believe it, God always talks to you. Well, she came up, and I remember it, and she told me her story. And I said, put up your hand at the altar church. I said, I'm in agreement with you that you're not going to let go of God until He fulfills the blessing He has for your life, never knowing that she was going to be my wife. And so when that ministry ended, she came down to visit that Sunday. Now, we have a prophetic church, and you go over to this corner, receive a prophetic word. She went over there. Nobody showed up 3 times. I was prophesying to people that Sunday. If their birthday was in February, come on up. I'm going to prophesy over all the February birthdays. And so I'm doing that. So while I am doing that, she finally says, nobody's coming to me. I'm going to the big guy. So she comes up to me, and I start prophesying to her. And as I'm prophesying to her, it's like God's talking to me. And I said, you're in a hallway that feels like a hellway, but God's going to water what's been dry, and God has your life planned. So as she's receiving that word, I'm thinking, God, are you sending me my wife? And she looks very young. When she's with her son, they think they're brother and sister. And so I looked at her and I said, she told me it was her son's birthday in February. And I said, well, how old is your son? And she said, well, he's 28. Well, my oldest son was 25. I thought, well, she's fair game. I just put it in the back of my head. So what happens is she wakes up having a dream. In this dream, she is seeing the face of my wife, who she has never met. And my wife is saying to her in the dream, continue the revival at Destiny and take care of Dale. I have reminded her several times, take care of Dale. That's your God assignment. Jesus really loves me. And we have a lot of fun. But you know what happened? I said, Lord, I believe that she is my wife. I'm looking at her, and she's cute. And I was preaching that night at a church, and she was coming up for the first time on the ministry team, and my eyes they were being drawn to her. And I thought, I can't preach looking at her. So I stood a certain way so I couldn't see her face, so I could concentrate on my message. So I bring it up again. I said, I want to encourage you to be like Jacob, not let go of God until He blesses you. And I'm asking you to put in an offering tonight and ask God, say, this is what I'm believing for. Well, she was down to her last $20, and she came up and put that $20 in the offering. And she said, God, you showed me in the dream that Dale's my husband. I'm asking for him. Now listen, God can show you something, but if you don't ask for it, some of you need to start asking what God showed you. You're going to get it because you ask, not because you need it. Because asking is your relationship with Father God. She said, I'm asking for Dale as my husband. And so, look what you can get for $20. Now, I was taking her to a meeting, and after this vision, she wrote out, I believe that you're I love you, I care about you, I forget all the wonderful things. But she didn't email, she said, I'm going to talk to him, and we got a cup of coffee, and we knew literally within 2 weeks of meeting each other that we were supposed to be married. It was supernatural. Now, she had been single. Her whole story, you can see it in a book she wrote, God, I Feel Like Cinderella. And in it, I had been literally, till we got, my wife dying until we got married was 7 months. I would not recommend it, but that's what God chose to do. And so I said, Lord, when should we get married? And in this dream I have, Chuck Pierce is coming up to us, and we're all on roller skates in the middle of a church, not other people, but the three of us. And that Chuck comes up to us, and we roller skate down to the front of the church. And I know Chuck Pierce doesn't marry people, but I had known him, and Luann knew him before I knew her. And so I called him up and said, Chuck, I feel like we're supposed to ask you to get married. We want to get married on 6, 7, 8. 6 is the number of man, 7 is the number of God, and 8 is a new gate. So when everything you are, the number 6, steps into number 7, which is God, it gives you a new gate. Some of you are about to do that right now. You're coming out of grief into a new whole place in God. So Chuck said, Dale, I'll marry the two of you. Well, he called back several days later and he said, Dale, I can't do that because it's my birthday, I forgot. And I said, Chuck, we were praying about when we should get married, and that dream was not about you marrying us, it was about the date. So how many know God even set the date? But I'll never forget, I was in that restaurant and I said, Luann, I knew I was supposed to marry her and she was supposed to marry me, but there was so much grief on me, I couldn't kiss her. And she leaned over and she kissed me on the cheek, and I literally felt grief go off of my body that I'd learned to carry over the last 2.5 years. I'm going to tell you, when the King of Kings kisses you and the future that God has for you kisses you, grief leaves you. I could not believe how much grief left my body, my spirit, my mind. And I had a dream. I just had one dream of my wife who died, which is incredible. And in the dream, she was much younger. Her hair was different. And I could tell she was bringing this bowl before the Lord, His presence, and she was worshiping Him. And I was trying to get her eye to see, are you okay? Is everything okay? And she wouldn't even look at me. She was looking at Him. And the Lord said, she's doing what she's supposed to be doing. You get back to why I have you on earth. Some of you are stuck because of someone who died. I'm telling you, they're in heaven. If they know the Lord, they're in heaven worshiping Him. They're having a better day than you. You're on earth for a reason. Get back to your reason. Well, the last part of this story, as I want to end it, the Lord uses Luann, my wife, in deliverance. We travel together in ministry. And the Lord spoke to me. He said, Dale, do you trust me? I said, yeah, but I want to understand what happened. Would you explain this to me? And he said, Dale, this is above your pay grade. You just trust me and you move forward. And you know what? Luann and I have had a wonderful life in ministry. And I want to tell you this. This is a time, some of you, you're going to go from grief and pain. I mean, I went from the tears of that funeral to the joy of the wedding, and God had done a supernatural thing. You say, why am I sharing this God encounter? Some of you, it's relationships where you need a God encounter. God will bring people your way. We've had to work on the marriage like anything else, but we have a lot of fun, a lot of joy. And listen, we marry each other because we think we're cute, but God brings us together because of the anointing. And some of you need to believe that are divorced that God has somebody for you that you don't even know about. God has a future for you. Some of you maybe lost a job. God has another job for you that's going to take you further than that one would. I wanted to ask Luann to come and join me on the set because it puts a face to my story. And you know, when I came and I got on my knee and I had 8 red roses and I said, 7 of these roses are for the 7 years of hell you've been through. I'm giving you the 8th rose for new beginnings. Would you marry me? And she said, I would be honored to. She had told me when she lost everything, she put a little picture of a BMW on her refrigerator and said, with God, all things are possible. And she said, God's going to give me a BMW. And so I had looked at one, and I told her, this is a day you'll never forget, took her out for a meal. Then we drove to a BMW dealership, which BMW means be my wife. And as we walked into the dealership, the man that handed the keys to her said, your name's Luann? Said, here's a BMW for you. A 7 Series, the exact what she had put on the refrigerator. But you know what the man's name was? His name was Joe Cover Dale. My name is Dale. He was covering Dale. And you know, we ministered and led that man to the Lord. He died 2 years later of cancer. But I'm telling you, wherever you go, where there's grief, expect a blessing. That's the God we serve. And I want to pray this prayer for you. I actually want to prophesy this. Where the enemy has tried to stop you, I speak the life of God. There's a dream that God has for you that will carry you past the pain. Never stop believing, because He is with you, He loves you, and He's going to bless your life.